This is part 2 of some videos on introductory palpation skills that you can do without a partner. So you just need yourself and ideally some other props to help you out. So in the first video, which if you haven't watched, I do encourage you to watch that one first. These might look familiar. So now we're going to be talking about layers. So these are the dry ones, but remembering that in the human body we have elements that might seem a little bit more solid or more dry, but it's all surrounded with, we're really like these bags of non-homogeneous kind of gel and goo and bits of bone, but even the bones have spaces in between and have parts in them. So nothing is completely solid. Some things definitely have more of a liquid element to them, like a bladder, right? But for the most part, things are mixed in various densities. All right, so as far as putting them together as layers, we could try to feel through some of the different layers. A surface like this has give, so it might be helpful if it was a little bit more solid, if I really wanted to get a sense of this layer versus that layer versus this one. If I have something solid underneath, that would make it a little bit easier. Other things that you can use to experiment and get your mind kind of thinking through. Some people will use an exercise where you have sheets of paper and you take a piece of hair and you'll put it under, and you'll see if without looking you can locate where the hair is. Okay, I put it under a couple different sheets and I can feel it here. Now, we very seldom just use one sense at a time. So admittedly, if I'm the one who puts the hair under there, I already have a proprioceptive kinetic memory of where I remember placing the hair. If my eyes were open, visually I saw where I put the hair. So this one may work better if you had someone else who could put the hair in there for you, or if you put it there and went away and came back to it, a few days later, a week, when maybe you forgot. But the idea with this one is, if you tried with it under one piece of paper and you felt pretty secure, like, yeah, it's right here, and you looked under, there it was at, then you move it under the next papers and you just keep going to see how many papers you can still feel the hair through. So that's one layered exercise. Other things that you can do are food. I love food because it's organic, and we're organic, not in the shopping type of non-pesticide organic, but in our medical science understanding of the term organic. And so these things are actually also still alive, which is helpful. They're not quite as full of physiology and motion as, say, your arm, but they do have more of that living layers to them. So as I said in the first video, it can be helpful if you have things to compare and contrast to that are different. So visually I can sort this and say, look, it's pretty green, so that's ripe, and if I felt ripe bananas, or not ripe, sorry, very unripe, and if I felt bananas a bit trying to figure out the ripeness, I'm probably already going to think this one's probably going to be a little bit more stiff. And then I could visually say, oh, this one looks more yellow and has some brown, so it's probably over here, and this one has kind of in between and some green, so it's probably going to feel here. I can do that visually beforehand or not, but I want my brain to get a sense of what are my kind of end points, and maybe something that's going to be more subtle because it's somewhere in between this range. So one at a time when you're starting out, maybe start out with the one that is less ripe, and essentially sometimes when people start palpation, they just like grab the thing and they're not even paying attention till they're already pushing in. You really want to make sure that you're aware of the whole time, even kind of like, here's air and I've just touched it, and is the skin smooth, or is it bumpy, or does it have little rough spots? Then the skin part, can I even kind of feel through when the skin is and when I've pushed enough where I'm really engaging into that banana part that you want to eat? Sorry, I'm not a botanist, I don't know the exact names of all of these parts of the plant, the edible and non-edible part, and then kind of feel through that. Versus this one, same thing, my mind is paying attention, here's air, and then I come in contact with something. I can even kind of see if I can roll the skin over what's underneath a little bit. I definitely can notice that this one's a little bit more squishy, and you can even notice how the ends are different and pushing the end in. You might end up making maybe some banana pudding or banana bread after you've mushed these ones. And then you can feel the in-between one. And so these ones, there is some layeredness to it, but usually, you know, if you know the anatomy of a banana, whether you know the names of the terms or not, it's essentially skin and then a squishy you eat part in the middle. Then we have stuff like avocados that have a skin, a squishy part you eat, and then a pit. So now we actually have more like 3 layers. This one visually, I can't quite tell who might be more ripe or less ripe. This one's going to be my ripest one. So how do I know? You know, pushing in. I have paying attention. Here's as far as my fingertips, because that's going to be, especially these 3 finger pads right here, they're more sensitive as far as mechanoreceptors. So, but I'm not just using the pads of my fingertips. When you are palpating, I'm feeling with my proprioceptive in my tendons, where my ligaments are, how I was allowed to actually squeeze this avocado. So it's not just the pads, but those can be useful information. And so here's that. I felt contact. Skin doesn't really let me roll it over the inner contents. There's a squishiness. Kind of hard for me to find where the end of the skin and where the beginning of the buttery avocado starts. And then a sense, this one's squishy enough where I probably could really squish it to find out where the pit is. But even though I am making guacamole later, I'm not going to do that one. But let's see. If I really take it in my palm, and maybe the other one as well, and I roll it. So I guess it depends on what you want to do with your food after you've played with it. Maybe I can try to feel the pit, okay? So potentially you could. All right. And then these oranges. These ones are nice because if you've ever eaten an orange, right, they're segmented, and so depending, sometimes you can actually get a sense of their segmentation. So when I push in here, I almost feel like I've fallen into a little bit of a valley, versus when I push in here, I feel like there's more of a buoyancy and it's not quite allowing me to as easily push in. There's something there. It feels very watery and juicy, but it puffs out at me. Versus, like I said, I get in here and then there's more of a valley. Suppose if I wanted to make a mess and confirm, which you could at your home to see, hey, did I get this right? I could open it up. I'm not going to make a mess right now, just to prove whether I'm right or wrong. So, but if that helps you, because sometimes confirmation can help you feel more secure, and then your brain will rely on that information more as it layers on more palpatory skills, feel free to slice and dice and make as much of a mess as you want. But segmented fruits like oranges can be helpful like that, to get a sense of something is different here versus there versus there. How can we then translate that onto a real person if you don't have a partner? Luckily, you got some arms, you've got some legs, etc. But if you start out on your arm, and like I said, if you do have something a little bit more solid, it might be helpful, but this isn't too bad. Really, start paying attention before you've even made contact with what people would normally think is the body, okay? So even right here, you might even get a sense of, is there heat coming off of one area versus another area? Parts of the hand that pick up on heat better are going to be here for your wrist, the front, the volar aspect of your wrist, and then the dorsum of the hand. I'm usually going to palpate people in this direction and not like this, so I don't usually try to feel heat. I multitask, and so when I go to examine someone's knee, you know, or their big toe, and I wonder if it's inflamed and red and hot with gout or something, I'm going towards it like this, and so I'm just naturally using this part of my hand. So you could see if you picked up on a little warmth maybe. So infrared radiation emanating from their skin. So I'm paying attention, and then here's hair. It's not super coarse, but it's there. And then right under the hair is some skin, and I'm just kind of going perpendicular force down to engage that tissue, and then a parallel force so that I can kind of feel how it moves. It's attached to stuff below, but I can get a sense of I'm moving it over things. that's my skin. And then I allow myself to sink in a little bit more and appreciate that squishy stuff that's under the skin. And that's going to be some adipose tissue, so some fat. We should all have a little bit of that. It's healthy to have a protective layer. And then if I push a little bit more, I should come into contact with something that feels a little bit firmer than that squishy fat layer. And that's going to be muscles. And then as far as underneath that, our forearm has two bones in it, the radius and the ulna. And they're essentially right like that. And so if I push down deeper, I can feel that underneath that muscle layer, there's something that's harder. So that's going to be the bone. Okay, so that's a good kind of starter to get you to feel. Here in the forearm is a good area, probably closer to the wrist, but not on it. And then later on, you can, once you know where various blood vessels, arteries come closer to the surface, say like the radial pulses right here, you can do it, but now instead of, so here I am, air, can't really feel much hair, but there's probably little ones, skin, there's a little something underneath, and it's pushing out at me, it's a pulse. So I don't want to be pressing as hard as I was to feel the muscle or the bone, or I'm going to squish the artery and I'm not going to be able to feel the water, the pulse pushing out at me, right? The blood is mostly liquid with some other elements in it, so I don't want to compress the tubing so much that I can't feel it flowing. So once you've gotten through these layers and get a sense of how much you have to push for that, then maybe go here and try to feel for that radial pulse and realize that if you push too much, you actually won't be able to feel that living motion. Sometimes less is more as far as that is concerned. Okay, so that's some stuff that you can try out as far as layered palpation.